So what is tonight's lesson all about? Well, we're going to have a look at the digital image, and I mean, we've looked at everything quite technical and creative up to this stage. Here on the photography course, we've looked at how to take our pictures in fully manual. We've had a look at how to control the color, control the exposure, and all of this throughout this course. But what about the actual photograph that we produce? What happens to it and how is it made? I mean, how many times have you uploaded photographs online and you've been really disappointed with the resolution? Or even worse, you've gone and you've printed off a photograph and everything's all blocky and pixelated and you're wondering what is happening there. And you know, I can see Deepika, you're saying it happens many times. Yeah, absolutely. This is something that I used to see happen all the time when I was working in camera shops. People coming in with phones, trying to print their photographs off their phones from Facebook. Everything was horrible and pixelated and they had no idea what was going on. That was all to do with our digital image and image size. So that's what we're going to be having a look at this evening. We're going to be having a look at exactly what makes our photographs, which is the pixel. We'll be breaking that down. We're going to have a look at resolution as well. What are good resolutions? What are bad resolutions? High res, low res. We'll be having a look at different file formats as well, namely JPEG and RAW, which are the two most common ones that we will use within photography. And I know you have loads of questions about JPEGs and RAW already. Even there I can see Gary is saying RAW is the best. Well, it depends, Gary, not exactly what we are going to be having a look at a little bit later on, because it's not as straightforward as one is better than the other. Okay, we'll have a look at some softwares that you can use as well to edit these files. What is Adobe Lightroom, what is Adobe Photoshop as well. So you might be thinking about the next step in terms of your photography, which is editing your photographs. And it is a necessary part of photography nowadays as well. And we'll be speaking a little bit about those a little bit later on as well. Okay, and then we'll have a review of everything that we have learned, and we'll also have our summary as well. And of course, we will have our Q&A to top it all off too. So we have a lot to get through this evening. So, have you ever had a photograph that looks like this? And this one sometimes confuses people. They think, oh, what's happened to the screen? You know, has something happened to my screen? Have I lost resolution? Yeah. Lots and lots of us, yeah, we've seen this happen all the time, especially if we're new to digital photography. We may have seen this happen a lot. Daryl, you said it's never happened to you. Well, you might have a good understanding of resolution already. Well, image quality refers to the quality of the image you record. It might sound like a no-brainer, but that's essentially it. Image quality refers to the quality of the image you record. Typically, we will always want to be achieving the best possible photograph and file that we can achieve. What we don't want to be doing is shooting and only getting half the quality or less than our camera can produce and ending up with images that look pixelated and blocky just like this. Or images that we cannot make nice prints out of later, and that's even more disappointing, I think, as well. When you've got a really nice photograph, you go to print it off and it just doesn't look good at all. At the end of the day, the file quality represents the quality of our photographs and our photography. We can shoot the most amazing images, but if they look pixelated, it drags the standard way down. It also just, if you are thinking about this in, I suppose, a professional sense as well, you know, it really does look unprofessional when you have photographs that are pixelated too. I've heard horror stories of wedding photographers accidentally setting their cameras to lower quality settings, coming home with pictures that cannot be printed bigger than a 4x6 inch print or 10 by 15 centimeters. And that is my worst nightmare as well. So it's something that, you know, you really need to be aware of. If your photograph is too small, you simply cannot make it any bigger. There is limitations involved here. So image size, understanding or optimizing sizing images for the web or any screen or viewing situations is also another reason to know this subject. So whether you want to promote your photography business or if you want to display your work on social networks, or even just share your images with friends and family through emails, then you need to know the importance of resizing your images. If someone visits your websites and they, if you have a blog or anything like that, they will take a fraction of a second to make up their mind whether to stay or leave. You know it yourselves. If you go to a website where you go to look at a photographer's website, you know, if the image is taking too long to load, what do? You know, if it doesn't load very, very quickly, what do we tend to do? You know? Just waiting on a few answers to come in there. Yeah, absolutely. Mark, move on. We just move on. We switch off. We move on. We click out. We leave. So many leaves coming in there. You do not want that to happen, especially as a photographer, because they'll never, ever come back. Okay, so optimizing our images for our web pages is also incredibly important as well. The same applies when attaching photographs to emails or putting them up on social networks. If they take too long to load, the person at the receiving end will get frustrated. They'll want to move on. They just simply won't hang around. And as I said, if they don't hang around, it's very unlikely they are ever going to come back. So understanding the capabilities of your images and what quality file you have to work on is very, very important. So let's get into it. Let's see how we can control all of this. So first of all, we need to understand what makes up our photographs. So this is the pixel. The pixel, which is the building block of our photographs. To understand anything about image size and about how images are constructed, you need to first know about the pixel. The pixel, the word pixel is short for picture element. In digital photography, a pixel is a single square of color, and it can only ever be one color. Okay, in a digital image they are vertical and horizontal lines that group together with no gaps between them, and we'll look at this in just a moment. The more pixels you have and the smaller they are and the less they look like individual squares, and the more that they begin to look like a continuous tone or image, and basically an image with lots of shape and lots of details like any photograph that you have at home. Pixels are really the building blocks of your image, and having thousands and millions of these different color pixels allow us to have full colored images. Okay, so let's have a look at this. Let's break our pixels down a little bit more. So here we can see how a lot of different color pixels all group together to start to form something that looks like an image. Now you might be able to see what this is already, but we can see this close that we can see the individual pixels, and we can see that they are all a variety of tones and shapes begin to form when these variety of tones are brought together. But each of these individual pixels is a single solid block of color. You can look and pick out any single one of these pixels, and it's only one color. Now it can be a little bit tough, because sometimes when you're looking at these pixels, there's a little bit of an optical illusion, and you might think that there's multiple colors going on in one pixel, but there isn't. There's only ever one single color in each of these pixels. So pixel means picture element, Amy. Pixel means picture element. So if we zoom out a little bit more, we can still see the pixels in this particular case, but I think if you didn't guess it from the first photograph, you could probably see it a lot more clearly here. Now we are able to begin to recognize the shapes and the forms that we are starting to see here. So you can probably see by now that there are a huge amount of pixels making just up a small area of this image. So let's zoom out even further. Let's go back a little bit further. So at this point we can really clearly identify the shapes and the lines, and we can clearly identify that section that we are looking at that's constructed of these rows of lines of solid colored squares. And this is because there are thousands and thousands and thousands of them in this area. So when we group them all together, this is what's forming our photographs. And at this point, the image is starting to look pretty good, of a high quality to our eye, and we no longer are able to identify that the image is made up of all these thousands of little squares. Are you guys starting to get a sense of how digital images are constructed? Excellent. So when we get really, really close to this image, we know that the image is actually constructed of tiny squares of solid colors, and the more we have and the smaller they are, the less our eyes can see and identify them. And this is where the term resolution comes from. Resolution refers to how the picture resolves to your eye and forms a normal image, that we cannot identify the building blocks that make it. And here's the full image, if we're to zoom out fully on this particular photograph. And as we saw when we zoomed in all the way in the eye, and if you think back to that first one, how close we were on that photograph, this image is made up of millions of tiny little squares. They're so small that we could never see them individually without or with the human eye. Sorry. So we would have to zoom in very, very, very close to be able to see all of these individual pixels. So does everybody understand the pixel? It's just the building block of our photographs. And once we understand what the pixel is, we can start to use it a little bit more and understand other terms that are related to it as well. For example, I just mentioned resolution. And as I said, resolution refers to how images resolve to your eye, where you can see it clearly as an image with smooth lines and lots of detail, or an image where you can see all the individual building blocks, all the individual pixels. Resolution also refers to the pixel count within the image, basically how many pixels there are, and we will have a look at this in a moment as well. So, let's have a look at some examples of this. So here we have a high resolution image, or a high res image for short, and it has loads and loads and loads of pixels. All the lines seem smooth and we have lots of detail, texture, sharpness, tone in the whole photograph. It looks like a good high resolution shot. We cannot see any individual pixels, any jagged lines or anything like that at all. It looks like a good photograph. Let's look at this. Let's have a little bit of a closer look at this. Let's look at a section of this magnified. So if we zoom in, we go right into the image, right into this little character, this little moon. There are so many pixels in this image and they're so small that even when we get in this close, we cannot identify the individual pixels. We still see all the lines and the shapes as smooth and well resolved. In simple terms, the image is still very high quality, even when we zoom in this close. Now, I want you to pay attention to some of the small little parts and small little details of this photograph. For example, the little cobweb here, or the little spider web. Okay, so we can see that that's still got lots of nice detail, even such a small part of detail here in the photograph. It's not jagged, we don't see the individual pixels there as well. It is still nice and smooth. And similarly with the edges of this moon, the back edge here, it's nice and smooth and circular. There's no jagged edges or anything like that on it. So let's have a look at that compared to a low resolution photograph. So this is a low resolution or low res shot. Now, can anybody see the difference? You might not be able to see the difference straight away. Some people might be able to see it. Ian, you're saying it is a little bit more blurred. Yeah, absolutely. Some people are definitely seeing it. It's less sharp. It's not as clear. Yeah, isn't so sharp, Nicholas. You're absolutely right. It's definitely not as clear. Now, at this size, it's probably not so obvious on our screens that this is of a much lower resolution. It's definitely a little bit more blurry, but it's not, terrible compared to the last photograph. But let's see what happens if we are to zoom in a little bit more on this photograph. Okay, so let's try that again. So now we can see, well, what can you guys see? Tell me guys, what can you see happening now in this particular photograph? Amanda, you're saying it's not good. Yeah, that's horrifying. Yeah, Liam, yeah, Raleigh, and Yvonne, you're absolutely right. Pixels, we can now see the pixels in the photograph. When we zoom in here, we can see very jagged lines. We can actually identify those individual pixels. The jagged lines that you can see here, they're the edges of those individual squares that are forming the shapes and lines. So again, if we're to have a look at, say, our cobweb or spider web here, the detail is pretty much gone in it all together. You can see each of those individual pixels that are making it all up there. If we have a look at the edge of the moon here as well, remember it was nice and curved and soft in the other one. We can actually see each of those individual squares very, very, very clearly at the edge of that as well. Let's just compare the two photographs together. You can see the difference is very, very clear. Actually seeing the pixels that make up the image, you get these jagged edges. There's no smooth transitions between the tones, like around the eyes here. Like for example, if we have a look at these kind of more complex areas of the photographs, just underneath the eye here of this character, the kind of lines here as well, they're lost. We lose them here. We lose all the detail here when it is of a much lower resolution. So there's no smooth transition between the tones like around the eyes. There's just hard lines where the blacks meet the yellows instead of a nice smooth blending of tones from one to the other. Okay, so this is zoomed in. Christo, you're asking how much is this percentage zoomed in? It's 100%. Okay, so it's 100% zoomed in if you're familiar with that within Photoshop in terms of how much has been magnified. But it's still more than enough to see that the difference between the two photographs. So how many pixels do you have in a shot? So now that we know what the resolution is, what high resolution and low resolution is and why we need to have high resolution, how do you know how many pixels you actually have in the photograph? Well, we measure the pixels across the top and the pixels up the height of the photograph as well. Okay, so basically we want to measure our pixels from the top of the photograph going across the length of the photograph. We want to measure the height of the photograph as well. So in this particular photograph, we have 5,616 pixels across the top. We have 3,744 pixels going up. Now, I'm going to ask you guys a question, okay? I'll take that off actually. I'll ask you that again. I gave you the answer there prematurely, but I'll also ask you there if you didn't catch it. How many pixels does this particular photograph have? It's a bit of a tough one. Okay, but if you remember your, though I'm wondering, did you see the answer or are we getting it there? Well, Joe, you've got the exact number there as well. Okay, but yeah. So when we multiply the height of the photograph going by the length of the photograph going by height of the photograph, this is when you get your actual amount of pixels. So if you think back to maths, if you were trying to work out the area of a place, you multiplied the length by the width. It's actually the same concept here when you're multiplying your photographs. So we have 5,616 by 3,744, and that works out at 21 megapixels. 21 megapixels altogether in this particular photograph. Okay, can everybody see how we worked that out? We multiplied the length by the height. Excellent. Excellent. Now, you're probably wondering as well, now, where do you find this information in your camera? Don't worry, we will check that out a little bit later on as well. Actually, we'll check that out right now for you guys. So if you are wondering where the resolution is in your photographs, how you can find it in your cameras, basically, it's going to be located, and this is just a Canon and a Nikon, it's going to be located in the quality or the image settings of your camera. Okay, so here you can see you can set the camera to RAW. We also have our JPEG options here as well. But can everybody see the resolutions here? So I have them highlighted there. So that is the actual resolutions there of your cameras. Now on the Nikon you can see here it's telling you it's 24 megapixels, it's 13.5, it's 6 megapixels. On the Canon it's telling you there as well, it's telling you that it's 18 megapixels. So if you are wondering how much resolution your own camera has and you're not sure, you find it in the quality settings of your cameras. You'll be able to set your different file types there as well if you are wondering whether you can set it to RAW and JPEG. We'll have a look at these RAW and JPEG a little bit later on, but that is where you find your actual resolution. So Harry, you're asking, how did I arrive at the 5,616 by 3.7 by 4.4? It's because it was a 21 megapixel camera, Harry. You might go over that one in when you're reviewing the lesson in the recording, okay? So on your camera, when you're selecting your file format or image quality, this is where you'll find the resolution of your camera. You can also check it later on at a later stage on your computer under the file properties or info. So when you upload your photograph onto your computer, you will be able to check out the properties. So if you right click on if you're using Windows, you can right click on the file and you'll actually see the resolution of it there, or if you're using a Mac, it's simply in the info of the file. It's a lot easier to find on a Mac. But you'll also find it through your image editing software as well. So for example, if you're using Lightroom or Photoshop or any other editing software, you should be able to find the quality, the resolution of the photograph that you're working on as well. Okay, so does everybody know where to find their resolution on their own cameras now as well? Excellent, excellent. It's very important that you do know what your camera's resolution is capable of as well. Okay, so do get familiar with it and where to find it. Generally, you will want to be shooting on the highest resolution anyway, but we'll speak about that a little bit later on. So, as I said, resolution refers to how the images resolve to our eyes. We've seen now as well how we can work out the megapixels of our photographs too, but how do we calculate image size? Okay, so there's two different worlds for our photographs. There's two different ways as photographers that we experience photography primarily, and that is on screen and printing. So we will print our photographs and we will also view them on screen as well. So we need to be able to understand that for these two ways of viewing our photographs, there is generally two different types of resolution that we need to use. So with printing resolution, the amount of pixels needed in the image to make a high quality print is generally about 300 pixels per inch, or dots per inch. Now, don't worry, I'll explain all of this in just a moment as well. But if you've ever seen the term DPI, that refers to resolution. And 300 pixels per inch is your dots per inch as well. PPI and DPI are the same thing. The amount of pixels that you need for viewing on screen is a lot less. It's only 96 pixels per inch. Now it ranges from about 72 to 96 pixels per inch. Okay, so it's a lot less. Now, if you were to try and print off a photograph with only 96 pixels per inch, you're going to have a very low quality print. Dave, you're asking what about the metric system? Don't worry, I'll speak about that as well. You can do it through centimeters as well if you wish. So let's work this out. Let's break this down a little bit more. If we have an image like this and we want to know how big a print that we need, so how can we work this out? So we want to print off this photograph, okay? So we need to work out how large we're going to be able to print this. Say I have 2,100 pixels going across the top here. I've sized this photograph to be 2,100 pixels going across the top, and I've sized this going at the edges to be 1,500 going up on the height. Okay, so we've got a width of 2,100 pixels and we have a length of 1,500 pixels as well. Okay, so that means we have a total number of pixels of 3,150,000 pixels, okay? So that means that I can, if I divide my, remember, 300 pixels per inch into my 2,100, that means I get 7 inches, or if I to work that out in centimeters, that's 18 centimeters. Lots of people saying it there already. Or if I divide my 300 into my 1,500 on the height, I get 5 inches for the height, or I get 13 centimeters for the height as well. So I'll just go over all of that again because it is a little bit complex to begin with. So basically, I've set my print resolution to 300 pixels per inch. Okay? We divide my 300 pixels into my 2,100, and we divide my 300 pixels into 1,500. 300 pixels per inch goes into 2,100 7 times, meaning I get 7 inches, and it goes into 1,500 5 times, meaning I get 5 inches, and if I convert that to my centimeters, it's 18 by 13 centimeters. Does that make sense, guys? Excellent. So a 5 by 7 inch print, Margaret, yeah, you're absolutely right. Now, you set your pixels per inch on your computers, okay? So basically, you would be setting your resolution to your maximum resolution in your camera. You bring it onto your computer when you're ready to print it, and you set your print resolution to 300 pixels per inch. So basically, if we're to break this down, I've got 300 pixels per each square here. So there's 300 pixels per each square here. and that means I'm going to have a good quality print at 5 by 7 inches. So each of those individual squares has 300 pixels per each of those ones. So let's see this now compared to our on-screen way, if we were to view this on screen instead. So now say we've got the same photograph and we don't need to print this photograph, we want to just view this photograph on screen instead. So let's break this down. So at the top here I have 672 pixels. And on the height, I've got 480 pixels. Now, I've got 96 pixels per inch in this particular case. So I'm using 96 pixels per inch in this particular case. So let's break down and see what happens here. So total number of pixels in this case is 322,560. Now, can anybody tell me, or can anybody remember how many pixels we had in the last photograph? So the printing photograph, how many pixels did we have? That's right, we had 3 million. We had 3 million pixels in that one. That's 10 times more than what we have for this particular photograph. It's 10 times more than what we had for this one. So this photograph is 10 times smaller than the previous photograph. Okay, so if we're to divide the 96 into 672, we get 7. If we divide 96 into 480, we get 5. So on-screen viewing is 5 by 7 inches as well. But because it's 10 times smaller than the previous photograph, if you were to try and print this photograph off, it's going to be 10 times less the quality, meaning you're not going to have a high quality photograph. However, this is perfect for viewing on screen. It's absolutely perfect for viewing on screen because our screen's resolutions are not the same as print resolution. Now, when we're viewing on screen as well, having the resolution much lower as well, what's the other benefit of this? So we spoke about this a little bit earlier. If we've got a lower resolution file, what's the other benefit of this as well? Susan, yeah, you're spot on. Angela, John again, loads quicker. Robert, exactly guys. It's much faster at loading. So this is the benefit of using a lower resolution when you're viewing on screen. If you're using a lower resolution to print, that's where you're going to run into issues because the quality isn't going to be as good. And it's vice versa. If you use a high resolution photograph to view on screen, it's going to take longer to print. So knowing the difference between what resolution you should be setting your photographs for viewing on screen against to what you should be printing is very, very important as well. Perfect. Great stuff. So is everybody still with me, guys? Excellent, brilliant. And as I said, this is something that you would set through your imaging software as well. You would set the resolution, your pixels per inch, through your resolution. So generally you would set your camera's resolution to its maximum resolution. When you upload your photographs onto your computer, you bring them into a program, you want to resize them, you would change your pixels per inch and you could choose then whether you want to use 96 or if you want to use 300 or so on, whether or not you want to print the shot. So moving on then, away from that, we were also going to have a look at the different file formats that are available here to us as well. And the two primary file formats that are available to us are RAW and JPEG. Now, just before I move on, can everybody still see my screen there? Just getting a couple of students saying they're having some issues there seeing the screen. Excellent, everybody can still see it there. Fantastic, great stuff. Okay, fantastic. So we're going to have a look at RAW and JPEG, and I know you guys have been talking so much about JPEGs and RAW and wondering what are the differences between them. Well, let's break it down now here and see which ones that we should be using. So the two primary formats in digital cameras, the way that they shoot, are RAW and JPEG. Now some cameras may use TIFF files as well, TIFF files. We won't worry about those for the moment. Really the two primary file formats that we use as photographers are JPEG and RAW files. Now Just before I go on any further, I always get asked the question, what does RAW stand for? It's not an acronym. RAW is not an acronym for anything. It's just like a raw ingredient. So if you've got a raw piece of meat or raw vegetables, it's the exact same kind of idea. We'll break that down in just a moment. But let's have a look at our JPEGs a little bit first of all. So a JPEG, it is an acronym. JPEG stands for a Joint Photographic Experts Group. A Joint Photographic Experts Group. So basically it was a file format that was created by photographers for digital photography as a kind of a standard file format. So let's break down exactly what a JPEG is. So it's a standard file format for photographic images. It's non-proprietary. That means it doesn't need a specialized software to view it. And this is one of the advantages of a JPEG. You don't need any type of special software to open it. It will open up in any kind of viewing program. So any device, anything that you want to have a look at a JPEG file, it should open for you with no problems whatsoever. Okay? It's a small file size, so it takes less space to store. It means you get much more shots on your cards as well. So there's a lot less space. They're much smaller file sizes. It means you have much more shots per card. So that's very, very useful. If you're running out of space on your memory card, you could switch back to JPEG and you will be able to get a little bit more space on your card. Now, Kevin, you're asking which is the best. I will answer that in just a moment as well, Kevin. And Jane, you're also asking, is it okay to use both at the same time to save in RAW and JPEG? I'll speak about that in just a second as well. Images shot in JPEG are processed in camera and are ready to use. So basically, on your camera, you can set certain things like your color saturation, your contrast, your sharpness. You may have noise reduction on your camera as well. These are all applied to JPEG photographs, okay? They cannot be undone, however. That's one of the issues with this. But they are ready to use. The best way to think about it is if you buy, say, a microwave meal. You know, you're out, it's been a long day, you go home, you don't feel like cooking, so you buy a microwave meal, you throw it in the microwave, it's ready to go in 5 minutes. That's what a JPEG is like. It's just ready for you straight from the camera. And it can be very, very useful for that reason. It's compressed, however, and it's what's known as a lossy format. So basically, the quality is degraded to obtain smaller file sizes. And if you continue to work on a photograph that is shot in JPEG, it will degrade through editing. So it's not designed for over-processing. It's not designed to be worked on in a long-term thing. The whole idea of a JPEG is that it's designed, it's cooked within the camera. It's cooked within the camera and it's ready for you to go. You shouldn't really be doing any more editing to the photograph afterwards, and it will lose quality. So if you're working, say, in Photoshop and you open up your JPEG file and you close that file again, you save it, you open it again, it will lose quality. Now, there is ways around it, and I can see Martin has just mentioned that as well. But the thing to understand is it is a lossy file. Fundamentally, it is a lossy file. It also has what's known as a reduced dynamic range. So another issue with this is that because some of these, these things like color saturation, contrast, and sharpness are embedded in the file, these are things that cannot be undone afterwards. So you may not necessarily want to have had them in the photograph in the first place. But it also means that we've got poor highlight shadow recovery as well. Dynamic range is the camera's ability to be able to see the brightness and the darkness in a photograph and not lose any of the detail. However, a JPEG, because of it's a smaller file size, loses a lot of dynamic range. Okay, now can everybody still follow me? Does that still make sense? Excellent. Sorry, I just saw some people saying they lost some sound there, but it looks like everybody can still hear me there loud and clear. So that is our JPEG file. So Amanda, you're just asking me to say what lossy means again. So lossy means it loses quality. It loses quality when you continue to work on it. James, you're asking, don't digital sensors have greater dynamic range compared to film? It depends on the camera, James. It is a little bit more complex than that, but digital cameras generally are getting to a stage where, yes, they have lots better dynamic range compared to film, but it is a little bit subjective there. It's a little bit more complex. It's not so straightforward as that. So now, looking at our RAW files to compare our RAW files to our JPEGs. A RAW file, we talked about our microwave meal there. A RAW file is like our raw ingredients. So perhaps instead of having a microwave meal, you want to go out there and you want to make a really nice meal for yourself and your partner. Okay, so you go out there, you buy lots of raw vegetables. You maybe, you like meat, you want to buy some raw, a steak or something like that. You go home, you decide you have loads of different ways that you want to cook this meal. You can add lots of spices to it. You can throw a load of salt and pepper in it. You can roast the vegetables. You can boil the vegetables. You can fry the steak. You can grill the steak. You have loads and loads of ways that you can choose to approach how you're going to cook that meal, because they are raw ingredients. This is the exact same with our raw photographs. So we have much more control over a raw file, but it means that we have to do a lot more work on it. It has a greater dynamic range. It's utilizing the entire range of our camera's sensor. We just spoke about that just a second ago. So it has a far greater dynamic range than a JPEG. This means the ability to recover detail from our shadows and our highlights is far, far greater than if we are shooting in a JPEG. It's a larger color space. Now this is a little bit technical for this stage, but basically it can replicate far more colors than a JPEG. It's got far more range, far more ability to produce higher quality colors compared to a JPEG file. You can make greater adjustments without losing image quality. You can work a raw file almost to infinity and not lose any quality with it. You can just keep working away on it. It's very, very easy to go back to the original file if you need to. It's uncompressed, so someone who's just asking about that, or Christoph, you've just said that it is an uncompressed format. This means it doesn't make the file any smaller in the camera, and it also does not add any embedded settings to the, like sharpness or contrast to the file. So basically, it's like a digital negative, Therese. Exactly, it's like a digital negative. It's uncompressed as well. This means all the information is captured by the sensor. It's higher quality, but it does also mean it takes up more space in your cameras as well. The only issue with it, an issue with it is that it is a proprietary file format. Each manufacturer uses their own raw files, and it needs to be processed in a specialized software. So generally, if your camera has the ability to shoot RAW, it usually includes the software with it so that you can do some basic editing to the software. So if you have a camera, it should have come with a little bit of software that allows you to edit the photograph. Now, if you're using Photoshop, or if you're using Lightroom, or if you're using any of these other programs as well, you should be able to edit your RAW files as well. But sometimes when you run into issues with opening a RAW file, it might be because of the camera manufacturer itself. So for example, on a Canon, a RAW file is called a CR2 file. On a Nikon, it's called an NEF file. On the Sony, I think it's called A or W file. On an Olympus, it's called an O or F file, and so on. So they each call them something slightly differently. They're not universal the same way a JPEG is. So is everybody still with me so far? I know it's a little bit more complex now. Nikons are called NEF files, and it's called CR2 files for Canons. But they are all RAW files. Now, full control over your image settings after you've shot the image is one of the big advantages of a RAW file. You can work and work and work and work on a RAW file, and you can always go back to the original one. They're a really, really safe way of working for photographers, but they do create very large file sizes, so working with them on your memory cards, they do take up a lot more space. But memory cards are very affordable now. You can get, 32 gig memory cards for absolutely nothing now. So that really shouldn't be an issue at this stage. Initially, they might look flatter and less vibrant than the JPEG. Okay, so when you upload a RAW file and a JPEG file on your computer, if you shoot RAW and JPEG together, it makes two versions of the file. It'll make a JPEG version and a RAW version of the file. If you compare the two photographs together, the RAW file might actually look less vibrant and flatter initially than the JPEG, but that's just because there's no adjustments applied to the photograph yet. So they're not suitable for sharing or printing without first being edited and converted to another RAW or another file format. You have to process a file or a RAW file. So it's called RAW processing. So you need to process the file, you do all your changes to it, and then you save it as another file format, like a TIFF or like a JPEG. It's perfectly good to save your RAW file as a JPEG after you've finished working on it. You're only saving it as a copy. You cannot overwrite your RAW file. Cleveland, you're saying you delete your CR2 files. I don't recommend that you do that anymore, Cleveland. It's fine. You know, you may not have known what the difference was, but going forward now, you definitely want to hold on to those files. Processing a RAW file is non-destructive, as I've just said. Basically, it means that you can keep working away on the file. It's never going to overwrite the original file. This really is one of the benefits of shooting in RAW. Now, for those of you who are moving on to the UPP, the one that we have starting on the 14th of February, you're in a really good place because we are going to be diving straight into this topic even more. So we are going to be diving deeper into our JPEGs and into our RAW files. We're going to start working on them as well, and you'll really begin to see the benefit of them. So this is a really good lesson to lead into that. So a lot of people still asking, should I shoot RAW, should I shoot JPEG? Well, I would be recommending that you start considering shooting in RAW. Having the ability to shoot RAW and JPEG as well is also really useful, because if you're not willing to completely give up those JPEGs just yet, that's a really good way, you know, to kind of ease yourself into that. Now, so is everybody still with me now? We've just got a little bit more to look at. Excellent, fantastic, great stuff. Diana, you're saying a little bit dizzy. Yeah, it's a little bit wordy, this one, all right, but we do show you some examples. We, you know, as I said in the advanced course, we're a little bit more hands-on in it rather than just talking about these files. Now, so the final thing then that we need to have a look at this evening is what softwares you might be thinking about in the future. And the two softwares that we get asked about the majority of the time are, should I use Adobe Lightroom or should I use Photoshop? Okay, and what's the difference between Adobe Lightroom and Photoshop? Now, how many of you are using Lightroom at the moment? And just to get a kind of, I just want to get a sense of how many people might be using the program. I see some people saying both. Yeah, lots of people saying both. Yeah, they are sold together. So lots and lots of yeses coming in. Fantastic. That's good to see. Lots of no's coming in there as well. Some people mentioning some other softwares that are out there too. But we will just be talking about Adobe Lightroom and Photoshop. Okay, so if you haven't used these programs yet, Amy, you're just saying it there, I haven't used any photo programs yet. But these are the ones that we would recommend. Amanda, you're saying you're exhausted by Photoshop. Well, we'll talk about Lightroom first, then we'll talk about Photoshop. Lightroom is all about photography. Okay, Lightroom is all about using your photographs and working on your photographs very quickly as well. The whole idea of Lightroom is that it's designed for photographers to manage your photography, to create a workflow for yourself. It's what's known as a DAM program, a DAM program, a DAM program. That stands for Digital Assets Management. So it's a digital assets management program. So the whole idea of this is that we can really quickly organize our photographs using Lightroom. We can quickly move them around our computer. We can make new folders for them. We can change the file names. When we've done all of that, we can then edit our photographs, and we can do some serious editing to our photographs in Lightroom. So if we're working on our RAW files, we have a huge control over our dynamic range. We can change our photographs to black and white. We can do lens corrections. We can fix the perspective in our photographs. We can do a lot of split toning in the photographs. You can get really creative with Lightroom as well. Essentially what Lightroom is, it takes all the best parts from Photoshop. It takes all the best parts from Adobe Bridge, which is another digital assets management program, and it brings them together all in one. Lightroom is what you should be doing 90% of your photographic editing in. Okay, that's the way I would generally work, is that you would do 90% of your photographic editing in, because the majority of what you need to do in your photographic editing can be done through Lightroom. Okay, Brett, you're asking, any reason I don't like Fast One? It's not that I don't like Fast One, I just don't use it myself, Brett. That's as simple as that. You know, Lightroom is the one that I'm just used to using. Okay, so that's Lightroom. You can do such amount of work in it. Now, compared to Photoshop then, what's the difference? Well, Photoshop is all about your big fixes. Okay, so Photoshop for me is when I've got a photograph that I need to take something out of the shot. So there's something in the picture that's causing me a problem, an issue, and I need to remove it from the photograph. Lightroom is okay for doing that, but it's not as good as Photoshop. So in Photoshop, I can take something out. If necessary in Photoshop, I can take another picture and use another part of a photograph and put it together to create something else altogether. I would use Photoshop for my big fixes. So if I have a big job that I need to do a lot of retouching to a portrait. I need to maybe change the color of somebody's dress. I might need to take somebody out of the photograph. Might need to composite, put two photographs together. That's what I would do in Photoshop. Photoshop is a very broad program. Photoshop is used by people who do web development. Photoshop is used by people who are like architects, who want to render, some of their work and so on as well. It's designed to be used by lots of people in the image editing industry. There's a huge amount there for photographers, but the majority of what you would ever need to do as photographers can be done through Lightroom as well. Now, the great thing about this though is that generally Lightroom and Photoshop are sold together. So they are a package that you get together. So if you're signing up to the subscription service with Adobe, you actually get the two of them together as well. Okay, so that way, the whole idea is it's the photographer's package. So you do your work in Lightroom. When you're finished doing what you can do in Lightroom, you bring in your Photoshop then if there's anything else that you need to do with it. And as Eric has just said there as well, Photoshop is for more creative aspects as well. Okay, so I can see some different opinions coming in there on Photoshop, in terms of how you might use it. But if you're looking for one that you want to get into, if you haven't done any editing before, the one that I generally would recommend is Lightroom. I think Lightroom, now I'm a little bit biased because I do teach the Lightroom course as well, but I do recommend that. Tanya, you're asking, isn't it cheating by using these programs? Absolutely not, Tanya. With these programs and with any photographs that you see, a certain amount of editing is always done by these programs, or by any photographer with their photographs. Think about a darkroom. In the past, photographers used dark rooms for their photography. We did a huge amount of work in the dark rooms to make sure that our photographs were perfect. It was very, very rare you'd get a photo straight out of the camera that was absolutely perfect. It's the exact same, with Lightroom and Photoshop as well. These are necessary tools for photographers to be able to bring the most out of their photographs. The way you want to use these programs is you don't want to fix your photographs, through Photoshop or Lightroom. You want to enhance them. You still need to have the building blocks. You still need to have your exposure correct. You still need to have your white balance correct in your photographs. So you're not fixing your photographs at that stage, but you're actually enhancing your photographs so that you're actually getting the most out of your shots. Okay, so does everybody understand that? Okay, that idea of cheating, it's not a good way. It's a counterproductive way of thinking as a photographer. You wouldn't say working in a darkroom was cheating, and I would compare these as your digital darkroom, essentially. Excellent. Great stuff. Okay, guys, so That was a lot to throw at you this evening. A little bit of a shorter lesson tonight though, because we do have quite a bit to get through now just before we finish up, okay? But did everybody understand all of that? Have we got a bit of a better idea and understanding of our different file types? Excellent, excellent, great stuff. Okay, so before we finish up, I know you've got loads and loads of questions about what comes next. I know you have lots and lots of questions as well about the final assessment as well and how to get your certificate and so on. So I am going to go through all of that now with you as well. Okay, so but first of all, I do just want to say this obviously is the end of our class, and it's even sadder because it's the end of the entire Foundation in Photography course, where hopefully we helped you to capture pictures perfectly. And I want to say many, many, many thanks for all of you and your efforts in attending the live classes. I really, really, really appreciate it. It's been great seeing all the same names coming up throughout all of these live lessons. But I also do want to say a big shout out to you for those of you who could only watch the recordings as well. So a big thank you to you for participating throughout the course, for sending all your photographs in, to the emails, for putting them on the Facebook and everything as well. But thankfully, most of you will be achieving your goals and objectives and working with myself and the team further. And I want to take this opportunity as well to thank the rest of the team here in the photography department in Shaw Academy too. They are a fantastic group of individuals, and it's been a pleasure working with them as well. So, you know, we've got Irfan, Arpit, Vivek, we have Ken all doing the support. I want to say a big thank you to Tom as well, you know, in helping me throughout this course and everything too. And you would have heard Tom as well on the on-demand lessons as well. So massive, massive thank you to all of those guys as well. 3 cheers, Jennifer, absolutely. I know it can seem like it's just me here shouting and ranting and raving about photography, but there really is a brilliant team here as well. So a massive, massive thank you to all of them. Now, I do hope what you got from this course is the importance of solid technical and visual skills. And it's all about the application of these skills in order to be a proficient, a skilled and a confident photographer. And I hope your confidence has increased, because being confident means you're going to be happy with your photography. And when you're happy with your photography, that is when you are going to take the best photographs, okay? In every instance, we always want to produce the highest quality images that we are proud of and that other people are going to admire and see value in as well. And it's absolutely the education, the experience, the constant upskilling that we do as photographers and the determination that we have to have, which will absolutely reinforce everything that you do, guys. And then through all of this, you can be a successful photographer, whether it's something you want to do as a profession, whether it's something you want to do as something at the weekends for yourself to make a little bit more income, or if it's simply you just want to be an incredibly skilled enthusiast. Like any other skill set you want to develop, it's through your dedication, your perseverance, and it's great. And it's through great training as well that you will get the results that you are after. Now, guys, I see lots and lots of questions coming in there. Don't worry, I will answer them all as well. Now, I would be absolutely delighted to help anybody achieve their goals by helping you to proceed and move on. And I know most of you are moving on to that advanced photography course as well, and to continue to learn and really develop your photography and learn how to capture pictures perfectly at the next level. So, sorry, excuse me guys. I know most of you already have your place booked on the Ultimate Photography course, but remember guys, there's only 12 days left. If you are considering it, if you're still thinking about it, you've got 12 days left to get yourself a place on the Ultimate Photography course. Now, I can see, Alfie, you're asking there, how do you guarantee a place? Well, you might have missed it the last time, Alfie, but if you upgrade to the Premium Plus as soon as possible, you'll lock yourself in onto that advanced photography course and avoid disappointment. Zero disappointment if you get yourself signed up. So for you guys who are moving on, do you want to have a look at what you're going to be doing in the next 12 weeks here on the Ultimate Photography program? Excellent, brilliant stuff. Let's have a look at what we are going to be doing, just so you're clear, as this is your next step. So, before we get really, we all get excited about capturing capturing pictures perfectly at the next level. Remember, all our advanced courses are designed in this 3-semester format, okay? The whole idea of this is that you can jump into one of these semesters at any stage. I have gotten a lot of questions from students asking about when can I start? Can I delay when I start on these courses? Well, our next semester starts on the 14th of February, which is the Creative Techniques semester. We are going to be looking at raw photography. We're going to have a look at HDR photography, black and white photography, all throughout that course as well. But some of you have been asking and emailing during the week about jumping into the following semester in March rather than straight away. And that is no problem at all. I see a few students doing our other photography courses before jumping on to the advanced photography course. So if you want to wait, it is possible to do that as well. Now, obviously, you still need to take advantage of the offer now to get yourself locked in, but you can certainly join us in March, April, May, June, whatever suits you as well. Charles, you're asking, do I teach the Ultimate Photography course? I do indeed. So I teach that on the Tuesdays and the Thursdays as well. So you will be able to join me on that course too, Charles, for sure. It's just a continuation on from our foundation course as well. So it is possible to start it in March, April, May. It's just continually, like the semesters are just continuing on throughout the year. You don't need to see the previous semester to join us at any stage, okay? The whole idea is that these are separate and you can just do them then when you feel that you are ready. So does that make sense, guys? I think most of you are going to be jumping straight on to the Creative Techniques semester, but if you get yourself signed up, you don't necessarily have to join us straight away on, you can join us in March. Brigitte, you would need to pay now, so you do need to sign up now to get yourself reserved onto the course, but you don't have to start it straight away. So if you're doing the 3-month or the 6-month or the 12-month option, it doesn't mean that you have to get in there straight away, okay? So, just to give you an idea of some of the work that we do here on the Ultimate Photography program as well, I want to show you what some of the students have been doing. And these are students that have started from the exact same place that you guys have started as well. Some of them completely new to photography, some of them with a little bit of experience, some of them with lots of experience as well. This is a photograph here from our one of our students called Arturus. Arturus was a massive fan of Trey Ratcliffe. Trey Ratcliffe was a very famous HDR photographer. And through our HDR photography lessons, Arturus, he really embraced his HDR photography and he was able to start producing really stunning images like this. Now Charles was asking again, how many weeks is the Ultimate Photography program? It's 12 weeks altogether. And Jessica's just asking that as well. 12 weeks altogether for the Ultimate Photography program if you want to complete the entire thing. Similarly here now as well with, sorry, I forget who we are looking at now, Ken. Ken was another student that we had here on the course and he loved his black and white photography, Ken did. He really embraced that as well. Really dramatic photograph here. Ken was really into his street photography and he wanted to try and produce really, timeless and dramatic street photography. So he really embraced the black and white lessons. And we've got those lessons coming up soon on the Ultimate Photography program as well. Remember, these guys, they started in the exact same position where you guys are at the moment as well. And I know a lot of you love your wildlife photography too. And Carrie Ann is based in South Africa and she really loved her wildlife photography, but she had some issues using telephoto lenses. So we do a lesson called Advanced Lens Techniques where we look at using more complicated lenses like telephoto lenses, and she was able to capture this photograph after this. She actually entered this into a competition where she was from and she won an award for this particular photograph as well. So really stunning shot here from Carrie Ann. And Brigitte, you're saying you need help with these lenses too. Well, we can certainly help you with this as well. Perry, you're saying go South Africa. Huge number of South African students on the course, Perry. We often see lots and lots of wildlife photographs coming from you guys. You're in such a great part of the world for that type of photography. So, the Ultimate Photography program capture pictures perfectly. We have loads and loads and loads of lessons on that course. I can't even tell you how proud it makes me when I see the course that I put all my blood, sweat and tears into. Looking back at those photographs, it makes me very, very proud to see where they came from on the foundation course all the way through the advanced photography course, and being able to achieve their goals as well. Now, we're nearly at our Q&A section, guys, so don't worry. Still lots of questions coming in there as well. But I just want to say, for the small few of you that said they cannot continue for one reason or another, I wish I had a time machine just to transport you forward to the next 12 weeks to see what you are going to miss. Okay, now, remember as well, Shaw Academy just isn't about all the course content as well. We are all about the support here, on the membership too. It's not just the classes that you're signing up for. It is about the support as well. And basically, when you're on the Premium Plus, you can use myself and the team here as well to help you with your own photography too.